Are we ready to go live?
Yep, we're doing her.
Huh?
Everyone, welcome to Lessons Told. Um, hello, Shaman Mike. How you doing today?
I am very well, Thunder. How are you today?
Um, I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Today we're going to talk about spirituality within ethics, a topic that I've seen a lot of people do. But I also think that it's important that we keep carrying the torch and talk about it a little bit. You know, many different opinions make an opinion can help us and maybe guide us down the right path. What do you
Love that.
think?
I completely agree. When we have all opinions on the table, we can make a truly informed decision.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interconnectedness between spirituality, the concepts, and a guide to a meaningful life and a spiritual life. To help us out, guide us, point us in the right direction of right and wrong. Um, what
Exactly.
is your take on ethics within spirituality or the rich religious experience? Is it a
That is
yay, nay, or
it's a yay because that is a topic that has fascinated me for a very long time. And the reason it fascinated me from
yeah,
everywhere I've seen people do things that were unethical when they were in a leadership position. And it always bothered me.
yeah, yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. I've experienced it myself, being that
Hmm.
person in charge, then all of a sudden you just do something wrong, then you're like, oh, I'm going to regret this. I'm really going to regret this. You
Right.
know, anger, flaring up, then it comes back and bites you in the butt. You know, lesson learned, never do over again.
Exactly.
But yeah, I was kind of like values, principles,
So what do you that's
and
a good go ahead.
these are core values, and principles. So what's your ideology on that?
Energy. When we understand, like for me, when I understood my core values, I understood what would feed me life affirming positive energy. And one of the things that helped me the most
Yeah,
understanding my values is numerology. Breaking down the numeric,
numerology, huh?
yeah, that shows us our life path. For example, I'm a life path 6.
I
The
never.
thing that will always give me energy is my family. If I need energy, I go play with my kids. And that
Yeah,
tells me the
yeah,
things I value. I
yeah.
value family. What is it? What is your
So
opinion?
for you, for me, I guess a lot of that is from being raised Catholic. So I've always had, like right and wrong within me. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of shaped my values, my principles within spirituality. But then again, I've been known to use tarot to say this is what I have to um, correct within myself. I've had people, look at me, a shaman right after I was first initiated. Why are you so angry? And I'm sitting there going, I don't know. I don't know, you know. So, I've had a lot of things, and people pointing at me. Why are you so angry? Huh? I don't know. And as I've gotten older, I've realized my faults. And I've also adopted tenets, the tenets of Radia, the charge of the goddess, you know, the Wiccan Reed. Does the Wiccan Reed really play a big platform within my life? It did for a while, but I also found out that it has flaws, because you do have to defend yourself, magically. And sometimes you have to go against that grain. So, it's principles, it's core principles. How do you believe in yourself? What is the merits of our spirituality as individuals? Because we could sit there and take a core system, from different religious practices like karma and dharma. We could sit there and look at the shaman's way of life, harmony within nature, but all reactions are from nature. So how does one guide themselves through all of these, you know, hoops and whales and what we think is spirituality? Is it really just something out of our brain? Ten Commandments? How does this all play a role within who we are as individuals, especially for like you're a shaman, I'm a witch. We do have what I would call cohesive glue together because we believe pretty much in the same thing.
Correct.
I've seen people say eye for an eye, and it's like, wait a minute, two wrongs don't make a right. You know what I'm saying? And I go
Absolutely.
through that myself.
My
So
dad used to say that all the time.
what?
An eye for an eye, and the whole world will go blind.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. It's to me the ethics and the influence within spirituality is a tricky. Um, how can I say it? Euphemism, because we have a bad habit within our own inner nature to twist. Like for instance, the Ten Commandments. We could sit there and view that and twist it to our own purpose. You know what I'm saying? It's like politics. We could sit there with the laws of the lands and twist them to say, "Oh, but this is the right way." When your brother or sister is going, "No, no, 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 no." And it's the same way with the Wiccan Reed. We could twist it, but he did this, she did that. How do we know what is ethically as a community and also as an individual know what is right and wrong?
that's a great question.
You know, and I've been really thinking about the whole thing, for the past couple of weeks. Chrissy's like, well, what class do you want? I'm like, well, I think I need to talk about ethics because for some reason, for the past couple of weeks, or I should say 3 weeks, it's something that's reappeared in my brain. And me and you was talking the other night, and I was like, hey, we started talking about ethics. And I was like, oh, wow, maybe we should, work together. I was hoping that Nico could join us tonight because,
Me too.
three opinions, would really, really make a good topic of how we can navigate through what is right, what is wrong. You know, um, we all have to sit there and find a sense of what is real, what is the meaning of life, what can motivate you, um, what can motivate you to act ethically and to contribute to the greater good. These are hard topics. It's like hexing, cursing. When is it right? When is it wrong? You know,
That's right.
you know, I navigate these rivers all the time, and I
And
point to people, especially my family, hey, do you believe in karma? Well, maybe you should start, you know, because what you send out does return. I'm sorry if I'm
absolutely.
taking over the conversation here. It's been kind of one
No,
sided. I'm sorry, man.
no, I enjoy listening to you, man. You got some great insight. You have a very deep well of wisdom.
Well, I don't know if it's great insight, but I just want people to sit there and say, what is your values? What is your principles inwardly? Because if you had good principles inwardly, then that's going to, you're going to show by example. And those values on the inside, your principles will show on the outside. And that affects the greater good. Am I correct? Or am I just smoking
Absolutely.
wind up my wazoo and thinking, you know, um, how about motivation for ethical behavior? What is our motivations? How can we cultivate qualities? You know, compassion,
And that's
empathy, self awareness, but also have the awareness to know when to uh, fight or flight. We have to know when to say, this is where I draw the line. I've either got to stand up or I just got to step to the side and just hightail out of here because I don't want a part of this. You know, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. And that's where
you know
your core values and principles come in.
to help
But go
guide you
ahead,
so you
man.
can face those challenges. And that's one of the things that I did because
Yeah,
when I first realized that, I didn't know what my values were. So I decided I'm going to take the labels off and just look at the energy. What are the things that give me life sustaining energy? Those also happen to be my values.
yeah,
So, my friends, I encourage you, look at the
yeah.
things that give you energy versus take it away.
Yeah. What's those what's those things that bring you to the negative side? Anger, anxiety, depression. Should we shun those, or should we keep a, a, a balance of goodness within our life that makes us happiness? Gives us the will to live. You know, should we have a balance of negative and good values within our life? We have to have a plane of existence because we can't have one without the other. Personally, what I've been doing lately is, oh, you're angry. I'll talk to you later, man. You know, that's been my life for the past 2 or 3 years. You're negative. I want to walk away from you. I just don't want to deal with it. You know, and
Right.
that's just me. Because I'm getting older. I don't want to deal with the stress. Maybe it's because my testosterone levels are dropping, but also I think that morally, I just want to take the higher ground. I don't know if it's because of the lessons that I've learned in my past that I just want to, I'm not holier than now, but I just want to take the higher path. Do you ever come across that a lot within your life
all the time.
where
And
you
as I
just want,
navigate, I just
you know,
want to take the path of least resistance. And as I do that, there's no frustration. There's none of that thing. It's just a constant stream of being fed energy. And as I become aware, oh, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling hurt, whatever, all feelings are valid. And we invite them in. That's the core principle of a shamanic teaching. Is everything brings in balance or comes in balance. And when you live in a balance, you live as your whole being, not just one aspect. And as we live in that wholeness,
yeah,
we naturally
yeah.
become more aware of what it is that we really need and want and can do in our life to make the life that we want. Have you
Yeah,
ever
I
heard the
agree with that.
two wolves?
Like, can you say that again?
Have you ever heard the story of two wolves?
No, I don't think I have. But would you tell us?
Absolutely, love to. This native grandfather had his grandson out. They're walking through the woods, and the grandson sees these two wolves viciously fighting, just going at it, right? And so the grandfather tells his grandson, "Those wolves are just like you." And he's like, "What? How are those wolves just like me?" He said, "You see the one that's black fur? Let's say that one's negativity, anger, envy, hatred, greed, lust, gut, all those things. You see the white fur one? That's all the good things in you: love, peace, joy, kindness." He said, "They're in a constant battle within yourself." And then the grandson asks, "Which one wins?"
Yeah.
Grandfather says, "It depends on the one that you feed, but you need them both because both are important to you. There will be times when you need to use your anger. There'll be times where you fall into greed, and that will show you what you truly desire and value. When we welcome all these feelings instead of trying to push them away, oh, I can't feel like that because I'm this, I'm, whatever label that we give ourselves, we're not being our whole selves. So we're hiding part of our truth. And regardless of the path, we all want the same thing. We want truth. And in that
Yeah,
truth is
I agree with that.
it's a fascinating.
So
That's
would
one
you
of the things
say
I
that
love about
truth comes?
Native American
So would you say
spirituality.
that?
Go ahead.
So would you say that truth comes from within, or does it come from without, or
My
is it a taught mechanism that we?
always thing. When we feel the resonance of something, we feel the truth of it. Very similar to the chart readings that I do with human design. That shows us how our energy is designed to
Yeah,
express this truth. We all have truth within us, and we want to express that.
yeah,
For whatever reason, we feel shame or guilt or like we can't. That keeps us feeling in a state of stuckness, and we don't know what to do. We don't know which way to turn because we don't know what to rely on. My friends, we all have an internal guidance system. Every single person. When we tune into
yeah.
that,
We all have a ethical guidelines built within us, or we adapt to them. Sorry, to them. One where we're either taught them or we're raised in an environment where it is presented by showing. Do you know what I mean by that? Where, it's like where I was talking about, you present the way you present yourself teaches another person how to ethically behave within a certain situation. Do you believe in that there is like codes of conduct to help people out to find, I would say, a virtuous life, a good life? Do you think that, aspects of this, like guidelines spoken orally or written down, like the Ten Commandments, that was handed up orally, the Wiccan Rede, the Charge of the Goddess, the Tenets of Aradia, which is fascinating because she's speaking about don't hold power over people, but at the same time, uh, poison the kings and queens who hold power over you unrighteously. But then again, she also talks about don't take no gruff from the church because all they are is out for what they can get from you monetarily, and also to herd us like sheep instead of being the goat. Do you see things like this within your life, or do you think that um, behavior of spiritual growth,
And
it's
when I
conduct?
think of leadership role in a religion, I think that those leaders are held to a higher standard. They have to be in order for them
Yeah,
to be able to facilitate their leadership. And you can see that in any church, regardless of whether any religion. If the leaders of that religion are not ethical and not truthful, there is chaos, and that
yeah,
chaos always leads to resentment, anger, despair when it's not mastered.
yeah. I agree with you. But a lot of times
That's
I've seen people come unethically into spiritual circles and take advantage of people. It's the wolves in sheep's clothing. They say one thing, then next thing you know, it's like a cult following, and people are
yes.
unethically taken advantage of. We have to guard ourselves, but it's seeing it. It's keeping that check and balance within your life, whether it's through your spirituality or through your political life, your family, your community. We have to watch. We have to have that ethics, and I think a lot of that, we have to stem from our spiritual growth and being able to recognize what is right and wrong, and not being the sheep that is corralled into an unethical uh, corral that is taken advantage of. And, to me, religion and spirituality is about the core part of being true to yourself and having the ethics to be able to be aware of what you are seeing. Does it go against the grain? And that's where a lot of our ethics sometimes either soar or we fall. We have to have some kind of conduct within ourselves. If we come from a military background, we recognize the USMJ, military justice. Um, it's the same way within churches. We should have some kind of regulatory. We do have that within the craft, witchcraft. That's where the term warlock comes from, when we totally go against the grain in our vows and we unethically reveal things that we shouldn't, or we do the worst of all things, which is we harm another person unethically. Hey, Nico, how you doing, brother?
What is up, man?
Did you get it
Completely
working?
Did it. My
nice.
graphics port is absolutely toast, but I had an old school pin cable and that port worked, so I'm lucky I have a monitor that takes that.
So you've been listening to us talk, or
No,
or
my phone was at 5%. I couldn't peep in.
Okay. We was like going into what I would say ethics of our guidelines or code of conduct, how we view it. I've been kind of talking Mike's ear off, and I really apologize about that. But,
You got a lot to say, man.
to me, to me, these are very important.
I mean,
No
their
matter
core
what our
values to
spiritual
figure
path
out.
is, it's important.
Mhm.
Yeah, or more or less ethically guidelines, our code of conducts. What do we believe in
Yes.
within ourselves when it comes, you know? Well, anyway, Mike, do you got anything to add what I was talking about? I'm glad that you're here, Nico.
Me too, man. Yes, there is, to me, the ethics. If I'm conducting a journey for someone or working with them in any way, I want them to be able to trust me. And if I don't conduct myself in a professional and ethical manner, there's no trust there. Therefore, I cannot really help them to achieve the transformation they're looking for, whether it's healing or insight or whatever. And in my own
Yeah.
experience, I realized the more truth that I'm able to express to myself, the more honest I am able to be with myself, the easier it is to be in my ethics, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah,
fundamental things
it does.
in shamanism is all about living in harmony. There's no reason we need to hurt each other or anything. Everything in nature, everything in existence is built to serve us when we can work with it in a true and balanced manner. Being that balanced, there's a natural exchange of energy where no one side feels left out or drained. And we harm someone, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it creates an imbalance in both the energy fields, which then creates karma.
Mhm.
What do you
Yeah.
think, Nico?
Yeah.
So it's complex things for me. So I'm a part of traditions that do believe in baneful work and justified work, but also that I view life as sacred as one of like the core pillars in my practice. So in the folk magic traditions, it's kind of the ethics of an eye for an eye, but I will do everything in my power up until the point that I have to get there. So we have plenty of things to employ, but physically or energetically tell the person to stop it off, knock it off, and then we move into okay, here's your warning, you've continued this behavior. Now I'm going to return this behavior to you or break the work done. And then if this person is escalative or this is a like reoccurrent issue, then I start looking at more aggressive means. But I never escalate beyond the equal force given. Um, and it's always I never do baneful work first. I do not go out of my way to do baneful work upon people. I can count on one hand the number of times that I have used baneful magic on people. Um, and that's in 20 years of practice. There's a time and a place for it, and you have to heavily consider the consequences required. And that will vary person to
Yeah.
person. I don't believe in unjustified baneful workings. I will protect those I care about and myself, but I don't do unjustified baneful work. I don't just go out of my way and go get my fingers in other people's pies. That to me accrues negative karma. Um, and then I believe in the balance. So if I am absolutely forced to do something negative, I kind of have to go through a cleansing period of like rebalancing. So I need to do more positive than I've done negative to kind of like rebalance my sphere.
It's very
Yeah,
insightful.
I can see that.
I got two questions with
I
that,
can
man.
Hmm.
One, do you feel like sometimes universe, the gods, call upon you to be the source of someone's karma?
Yes, I I have been the judge, jury, and executioner, so to speak. I've also had people who have wronged me that I have never taken to an altar, and their life falls apart. And it's about having that communication with the spirits you work with. And before I do any kind of work on anybody, for good, whatever, I'm doing a reading. I want to know what's going on, what happens if I do this work, what's it look like if this work is successful? Um, am I even supposed to do work? And especially not just for myself, but other people. Because sometimes the spirits have things in motions you don't know about.
That's yes. That
Yeah.
in shamanism, it's similar, where we don't. It's not really considered or viewed as baneful. It is simply a service that we are being called by spirit to perform.
Yep.
And in that, when I look at it that way, I don't feel like I've created any karma. I simply
Mhm.
followed through with the guidance I was given.
I agree with that.
And
It's similar for me. If it's justified work, I don't receive any negative consequences. I am not responsible for what the spirits do with the information provided. I am simply the messenger.
right, I guess the old phrase "don't shoot the messenger" really applies.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, I have to agree with that. So would you say that was either ethically correct or incorrect? That's where a lot of people kind of shoot themselves in the foot because they think that it is right and that the spirits are telling them, you know, hey, you got to intervene.
It depends
Sometimes
on.
it's best just to sit back and reflect for a time of period,
Mhm.
you know.
Yep. I give myself
And I've
three
done this
days.
to myself.
Mhm. I put 3
Hmm.
days from the time I decide that I might need to do something, and then I give myself 3 days because I don't do the work when I'm emotionally charged. I do not do work out of anger, and I'll do work out of joy, happiness, love for people, but I will not do any negative work when I am angry and enraged. I have a sharp tongue and I have sharper hands, and I will make things way worse than they need to be. And
Yeah,
that's my flaw, and I
yeah.
know that.
I agree with that. So you do you guys have in a form in a or a way a golden rule, where you treat others as you would want them to treat you?
I like
Yes?
how
No?
the satanic tenet has a really good one for this one is um me disrespect 3 times. The first time is a warning. You had that conversation. This isn't draw the barrier. This is unacceptable behavior. The second time is you meet them where they're at, and the third time you destroy them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Familiar with that.
Yeah, I can
And
understand that.
I do something very similar. If a boundary is set, like the first time, okay, ignorance, didn't know any better. But once that boundary is set and then it's crossed, then I take a look at myself first. Okay, what did I do that led me to this experience to have that happen? Do I need to reinforce boundaries? Do I need to
Yeah.
show up stronger? And if it happens a third time, that is when I take it as that spirit's way of saying that something, you're here to shift something.
Hmm.
And like Nico, I don't ever work. The only work I ever do is from a place of stillness.
Hmm.
When I am coming from that place, there is no right or wrong. There simply is just expression of the energy that wants to take form in the experience.
Mhm.
And it really reminds me, it sums up beautifully this Japanese saying, samurai. A samurai was dispatched to kill this man because he owed the Lord money. And when he got to the man's door, the man spat in his face. So the samurai sheathed his sword, turned around and went home. Came back 3 days later and then killed the man. And they asked him why. Like, why did you come back 3 days later? You're already here. And he said, because when he spat in my face, it angered me, and I could not take action from that place.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important too
Yeah.
for ethics and everything.
Really
Like,
cool.
we are able to be that stillness. We have so much more clarity, so much more guidance from source, gods, everything.
And I want to say
Yeah.
there's a
I
lot
love that.
you can do to stand your ground without ever harming somebody. There's a lot.
Yes.
I have seen more people who solely practice the harm none do things far more than I would as somebody who works both sides. You can
That's
one of
where
my
people are taking the
favorites.
Buddhist
Yeah, one of my
beliefs.
favorites
You know,
is what some people call forceful healing, where you put life lessons in somebody's way and they are forced to confront who they are and the wrongs that they have done and learn from those lessons, and that they will repeat those lessons until they succeed them. It's one of the harshest things you can do to somebody without ever harming them, is make everything fall apart and make them learn the hard way. And no harm comes to them. Or bless everybody else around them. That's another favorite. You bless everybody around them, and they have to watch everybody in their life succeed but them.
That's really
you know, my biggest thing was when somebody would do me wrong was to look at them and say, I'm going to get you back. I am going to make you suffer like you have never suffered before. Then all of a sudden, you know, 3, 4, 5 days go by, a month goes by, 5 years go by, and
They
they're
cross
still waiting
themselves in
for
that.
me to retaliate,
Oh no,
and I
they did
don't
it
take
for you.
no action toward it.
You
Yeah,
didn't,
just
but
my
you set
words,
off a chain of motion that caused them to curse themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That one's also
I
fun.
don't know if it was really cursing themselves, but it
Well,
made
that's
them
from the Art of
stand
War.
back and think about their morals of,
Yeah.
you know, doing somebody wrong.
Mhm.
You know,
That's from the Art of War.
yeah, it was a
Is
cursing
to
way, but
like
it was unharmful.
yeah, it wasn't
You know,
harmful. Well, maybe psychologically slightly, but it depends.
based
Because that's one of the other ones you can do is like psychologically make somebody believe that you were the threat and that you are in fact doing things and you never lift a finger.
yeah,
Or you can bless
exactly.
somebody if they're a problem, you can bless them out of your life, give them a new job somewhere out of state, and just
I
wait it
remember,
out.
Interesting
hey,
question with that.
Nico, I remember when, yeah,
From that viewpoint, if we are to give them life lessons,
Mhm.
I wouldn't necessarily myself personally view that as anything negative.
No,
Because
that's not it. The only like quote unquote, it's not even a baneful working. It's just like alternatives to doing the baneful working. Like there's always an approach to go outside of like malicious work. Um, and what's considered malicious will vary depending on practitioners. Because like I view love spells as a super malicious work. Anything outside of a self love spell or a like a self love or drawing just general love to you, I view that as a warping of the will. But also in other areas of my practice, I'm absolutely fine warping people's will. But I don't believe love should be artificial. It'll never succeed.
yeah.
correct.
Because anytime you do a love spell, whether it's for yourself or for somebody else, you're interrupting somebody else's will outside of that circle. Whether it's like if I did a spell for you, Nico, for love, it may not be so and so's name, but I'm still, in a way, I am casting a spell for you to influence another person's will to come to you.
Yes.
So is that right or wrong? You know,
in my
moral high
morals,
ground.
it's wrong. But at the same point, I will overwill somebody to get something that I truly desire, as far as like if it's between me and somebody else looking at a house and I really want this house, I'm gonna do work to get that house. And that means that that other person won't. And like that's something I'm okay with because that's not.
But that's still baneful magic because you're interceding your, well, how can I say it? You're putting
I'm
your
still
will
warping other
over
people's
somebody
will.
else's will.
Yes. But that's a thing in folk magic is that their folk magic was historically used to swing from the low side. So it's almost always going for systems of oppression and things like that. So there's a lot of working involved with swinging up at people who are better off, more protected by the government, like things like that. So there's a lot of areas that those things were done to protect the individual. And sometimes they're still used, and sometimes they need to stay where they're at. But it's there's a lot of ethics to consider with a lot of spell work. Because say you do a money working, and you're trying to bring money in. How specific do you get?
That though, Nico.
Yep. How specific do you get with where that money comes from? And does that do you include that money brings no harm to other people? Because you could ask for money, and an in-law dies, and you get an inheritance. That's money coming in.
Yeah.
And it's the specifics of not only your wording and your intention, but sometimes being too vague is the problem. And that it's not your fault if you ask for money and that's what happens because the universe took the least route of resistance. You had a sick relative and they passed. You got the money. It's not something that was a big struggle for me in my practice, is coming to the acceptance that when you release something to the spirits or the universe or whatever deity, that I am no longer responsible for what they choose to do. I can only bargain with them on how they provide it.
Yeah.
And
so
this is a really good topic. Intention matters. If I'm doing a love spell, I am just calling love in.
Yep.
Love of friends, family, life. I'm not focused on a specific person.
See, that's ethical in my opinion.
Yeah, and to me too. Unless I have their specific permission.
Yeah, if I have consent of the individuals, if I was doing love working and both individuals consented, I would be inclined to do it. I have consent to both parties. I'm fine with that. But there's times where consent doesn't necessarily matter. At least in my practice. No, I prefer to have consent when I do spiritual workings. But obviously, if somebody's trying to curse you and hex you or whatever, you're not going to get permission from them to retaliate. I'm just going to do it.
And
well, a lot of people,
would that be considered, if they're casting spells against you, forcing
it's
you
self-defense.
Right. But ultimately, what I'm getting at is they're creating that experience so that your two energies can play.
Yeah, they revoked the right of consent in the first place. Well, and it's just you can. You could go as far as that as, you have. I'll use Christianity as example because I get this a lot from other places. that say a Christian comes in and that they're praying for you to turn to their God when that doesn't align with your spiritual beliefs or practices. In my mind, that is not coming out of a place of like purity or conviction or like a genuine blessing. That is a malicious like conversion that they're attempting to force that will upon you. That is something that is an issue. But if somebody's truly wishing you well, like if they're wishing for your health, for success in your life and things like that, I'm fine with that. But that kind of goes back to that intent of like, what are they truly praying for, and what's the true intent behind that? And while intent isn't everything in magic, it does factor in. Um, I'd say it's probably like 20 or 30%. Like, depending on your tradition, like the spirits are used to certain things, so you may have to use specific ingredients to get a result from the spirits. And then your words and your intentions, and then what follow up actions are you doing to support the work you're doing?
Love that.
Now, this question I got to ask you on this: if you do what we would deem as a white magic spell, okay,
Mhm.
or we do a black magic spell, is a spell, or does it fall within black or white? And a lot of people within the witchcraft community will go, I'm a white practitioner or I'm a black practitioner.
Do you know where that stems from?
In my eyes, no, not exactly. No.
The concept of white and black magic stems from colonialism. And it was a term, white magic was to reflect the European folk traditions and things like that, whereas black magic was associated with things like Haitian practices and ATRs. So it was originally used as a demonization of ethnic groups' spiritual practices. So it was an othering. And in modern times, a lot of practitioners are trying to move away from it, because it does have some charged weight here in the US, and it's different outside of the US because they have terms that are similar, but they didn't include like the transatlantic slave trade, and so it doesn't have the same cultural weight as it does here. Um,
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you can't use the terms, but that there's a connotation behind it, and that I think people need to be aware of the implications, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes total
I
sense.
view magic as being gray, not necessarily white. I do recognize that there is goodness, but I also realize that there is hate and evilness within our magics and the way that we ethically deploy or use magic.
Yes.
Do you guys
Nature
get where I'm
is-
going with this?
Yep. Nature is as kind as it is cruel,
So-
and I think most people, to be in balance, need to respect and do both to a point. And I'm not saying to go outside of your ethics, but you have to observe your shadow to be able to see the light, and vice versa. Like if you're casting a light that strong, your shadow's standing behind you twice as big, and it can bring an imbalance within your practice.
Now, to me, Nico, it brings me back to what Mike was talking about, the two wolves fighting. You know,
I love that parable.
it's one of these ethical things that comes from within. You know, do we show compassion and love and, turn the other cheek, so to speak, when people are belligerent, showing us what I would call disrespect or laying their hands on us? When is the lines for us, of ethically looking at, I'm going to curse your ass. I'm going to make you really
I think that
pay. Or
that's
we
a
look at them and
scale.
say, I really love you, man. I'm really empathetic on your calling here. I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm just going to let you skate. I'm going to
And
take the punishment.
I think in my younger days, I was very, very much more so you have done me wrong and I will do so in return. I matched the energy very much. The older I've gotten, the more I've kind of relaxed with things where I will do more spell breaking and neutralizing versus engaging in that kind of drama, because you start a cycle and then you have to figure out where you're going to end the cycle, and it's a lot of time and energy, and those are precious to me. And a lot of the times they're not worth the herbs, they're not worth my time, and they sure as hell aren't worth the altar space.
Yeah, yeah. So I got another question I want to ask you guys. Is spiritual the spirituality influence on ethics, does it have values and principles?
I would say so.
Did you guys catch what I'm saying here?
Yep. I think
Does
that
it
there
shape
are,
an individual's core some values and principles?
they can definitely influence. Because like I said earlier, different traditions will have different values and principles to like where these lines are. And like some traditions don't have any workings to do anything like that. Um, or to do retaliative magic and things like that. And you have traditions like some of the ATRs where they're not allowed to do any negative work at all. You cleanse that off. You do not
Yeah.
do any retaliative work that is an affront to their spirits. And it kind of depends on what system
What do
are
you
you
think, Ray?
approaching it with, and what are the values, and where are the boundaries within that tradition, or what are your personal boundaries if you're not in a tradition and you're more eclectic, or um, depends on the tradition too.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of where motivation for ethical behavior comes in.
Mhm.
I believe that a practice of a religion or a spiritual path, whether it's self-taught or not, should have core values and
Mhm.
principles, which in turn influences our ethical choices, uh, our spiritual beliefs, in the what I would call the intercorrectness of all things that we believe in, especially to like strong communities, environments, or social justice, our motivation for ethical behavior, like our spiritual practices or meditations or mindfulness, or cultivate qualities like compassion, empathy, self awareness,
Mhm.
and environmentalism or social justice. You know,
Well, and it
these are all
depends.
ethical decision making things from within. And I think that
Mhm.
we should really take a look at it.
Yeah, and depends. Do you have
What
an
do you think?
Orthodox tradition or an Orthopraxic tradition? So is your tradition reliant on external forces that help govern things, or is your tradition governed by the deeds and your accountability? And that'll vary things too. Because like
Yeah. What do you
Helpful
think,
and
Frank?
Norse paganism have a deeds thing where that
Yeah.
you have to work through honor, and they have a code of how you are supposed to exist. Um, Whereas other traditions like Wicca have a karma system, and that like the universe will seek balance upon you for disrupting it. And it depends on your outlook. It also depends on the values within your tradition. Because like for me, it's reciprocity, reciprocity, right relationships, consequences, ancestral duty, pragmatic service, and self accountability. And that comes down to you give what you take and keep the energy in balance, honoring your spirits, whether those are the disembodied, the spirits of a place, or deities, and then considering the outcome of what the works will do versus morality. So I may be upset at somebody and want to retaliate, but they have kids in their home. And if I curse that individual, I'm not only affecting them, but everybody around them. And say they lose their job and now their kids have no food. That's an
Yeah.
innocent bystander that's done nothing wrong to me that is suffering because of something I chose to do. And those are things to account for. And
What do you think, Mike?
Absolutely, I think that our ethics and our morals are subtly influenced through multiple channels. And the more that we realize and become aware of those influences, we realize what is actually guiding us towards towards our goals and what we want in our life versus what's creating stress and drama.
Yeah.
Perfect example, my ex-wife,
Yeah.
when we got a divorce, I wanted to curse her so bad. I wanted to just shred her to pieces. And given the type of work that I do, I could. But I kept getting this take the high road. That's the only message I would get everywhere. And 2 months after we split, she totaled her car. Didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, it's
there's times
kind of interesting how what goes around comes around, That's why a lot of times I prefer to take the high road,
Oh yeah. Sometimes I'm the agent of karma. Sometimes karma's the spirits. Sometimes it's somebody else's job. It ain't my problem.
Right.
So would you say that within our spiritual past that we should try to live a more virtuous life? Within
I
our
try to
spiritual
live
path?
by good deeds and what I will leave as a legacy, if that makes sense. So I would rather be known for the deeds that I have done and the actions that I have taken and the people that I have helped. But also, if I am forced to, I will still get my hands dirty. But I will wrap that in as much love as I have. Like, I will wrap them in all of the transformation and the hard lessons that they need to learn and wish them the best on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Same
do
thing.
you think that throughout our spiritual life, as we are growing with ethics, because a lot of us, like for me, I started when I was a young adult within the craft, but I have changed. Inwardly, I have changed. Do you think that we should all self-reflect and grow from what we see and what we learn from each other?
I think so.
Absolutely. To me, that's the whole point of having this human experience, so that we can have that new awareness. I was just having this conversation the other day, is that I feel like we're on the cutting edge of creation itself, and each thought, each action creates the next step of this new creation that we all are engaging in. And when we learn how to answer your question, Thunder, balance is it for me.
Mm-hmm.
I want whatever I engage in,
Yeah.
I want to enter into that in a balanced state.
Mhm.
And that way I know no matter what
Yeah,
happened,
because
I took correct action.
Chaos
well,
brings
for me,
growth,
I kind of,
but
for me, I kind of walked the Buddhist path, but I'm very much a witch. I also live by the golden rule, but not necessarily to the point where I'm gonna let somebody lay hands on me.
mhm,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Absolutely.
I do believe in, you know, if you fight with the old dog, you're going to get what the old dog's going to serve out. But also at the same time, I believe in, trying to sidestep that with kindness and love,
mhm,
empathy of trying to understand. But I don't go out of my way anymore to get in trouble because I'm happier being within solitude than being with groups of people. So, I don't
mhm,
stand out like I used to. For me, if I would
yep,
go to a straight bar, um, there was always trouble in there for me. You know what I'm saying?
mhm,
For
Yeah.
some reason, trouble just followed. But if I went to a gay bar as a straight male, guess what? I don't get no trouble. I don't have to deal with all the immature masculinity. Kind of weird, isn't it?
It
say the
is.
So,
most trouble
what
you're
I'm
gonna
trying to
get in
say,
there is somebody trying to go home with you that you're really not into.
Uh,
yeah,
that
yeah.
should create a networking fund. There was
I
some,
don't usually have that problem because out there in Colorado Springs, when I lived there, we went to a place, Club Q, and I'd walk in, I would see a few people that I would know. Usually, all of them were lesbians. Precious to my heart. That was very kind to me. It was very accepting to me and my family. And I'd go up to the bar. All the guys would make a pad for me. I would order my drink. I would look at them, say hi, take my shot, get myself a Coke, go sit down. I didn't have all that drama. I go
Mhm.
to a straight bar, there was drama,
People trying to fight and
you
you
know.
name it.
and just ruined the whole vibe.
Oh,
Mhm,
it's a different moral concept, going to,
mhm,
for me, it was that balance of finding where I could go, where I couldn't go. So what I'm trying to
absolutely.
say to people is don't go look for trouble. Don't go into places where trouble is. Don't put yourself out there to get in trouble.
That's a
Try to
whole
live
nother thing too.
balance, a balanced, ethical life.
Hmm.
You don't have to adopt the Christian's view of, you can slap me on one cheek, then I'm going to slap you on the other, and you're going to let them skate away. Just means don't go to places where that kind of stuff is going to happen to you.
Hmm.
Right. Don't put
You
yourself in
know,
that situation.
Yeah, it's about
yeah. And I
minding
find a lot of
your peace. Peace is
Right.
yeah,
very expensive, and there's a clear difference between being peaceful and being harmless. Peace is
yeah,
expensive, and I will protect it. I am not harmless. It
yeah.
took a lot of
I just
violence to become this happy and peaceful.
Right. Guys,
now
one
same
of the
token, it's
coolest things
the
to
same
think
way with
about
your magic.
Hmm.
is the Dalai Lama. Like
Hmm.
that man, if the Dalai Lama was to ever flip out, like the amount of rage that person could probably produce would be, well, it's scary but phenomenal, astronomical.
Look at the Shaolin monks. Look
Yeah,
at the Tibetan,
yeah,
the what are they? The Theravada monks. Like they choose to do no harm, but they train daily for their discipline. But if you were attempting to rob
yeah,
one of them, they will hand you everything that you want with a smile on their face because it does not matter.
Right. That is absolutely
yeah.
correct.
They believe in living in harmony. You know, and that's a really hard thing to achieve in this modern world is that harmony. You know, I've strived most of my adult life to what would you say banish the shadows, so to speak. You know, everybody always talks about, you know, when you're going through witchcraft to banish your shadows. You know what? Sometimes those shadows keep coming up, coming up, coming up. And that's where you have to have ethics. You have to sometimes be like the Dalai Lama and you have to smile and say, no, thank you. Those are your opinions. Those are your problems, not necessarily mine.
Right.
Now,
And you
this
have
is
to
where I
try
would
to
agree
walk
with
away.
Mike.
And it's hard.
I,
It's really
I like the shamanic principle of shadow integration, not dismissal of the shadow. It's about accepting your flaws and then strategizing around those. Because I'm not trying to break
yeah,
myself down into pieces that are digestible for other people's comfort. It's you get the whole cake or nothing,
Right.
and
And
like flaws and
yeah,
all. Even our gods have flaws,
that's
and that's part of the beauty of it. Like as a Norse pagan, Freya was so lustful that she cheated on her husband to gain power, and she suffered the consequences of that. Odin sacrificed his eye out of greed for more knowledge.
yeah.
and I
And like
love that.
there
But yeah,
It shows to me when I read that, when I read the stories of Freya, of Zeus, of any of the deities, it is a clear example of how they dealt with those things.
yes.
Imagine, just
And
for a minute, guys, imagine that you're a powerful goddess, Freya, for example, and you have all of this power within you that just wants to come out.
mhm,
And if you're living in your lower centers, if you, the lower mind or the animalistic nature, we call it in shamanism, you're ruling lust. You're allowing that to rule your life, much like Freya did. And if you want to see how that turns out, read the stories, commune with
mhm,
them, and they will tell you very apparently and very easily. And,
often dramatically too.
yeah,
yeah,
that's one of the other things. Reason I love alchemy too. And alchemy to me
yeah.
plays a very important role in my shamanic practice because that allows me to pull them,
Mhm.
communicate with them, and ask them, okay, you have a gift that you want to give me. That's why you're here. What is the gift that you would like to bestow upon me?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a simple acknowledgement. Other times it's a ability, a skill, or it can be a whole slew of different things.
Oh yeah. And there's so many. One of the phrases that I like to use is, "I am healing. I'm not the healed, but I am a healer."
Yes.
Because you're always working on improving yourself, whether that's through knowledge, changes in behavior. You should constantly be trying to be your best self. But that doesn't mean that there's not grace, and that, it's hard. It's a lifetime of work.
Sometimes grace has to come through force. That's
Yes.
what I have found. Sometimes grace has to come through another person's force upon you. You know,
Mhm.
a lot of times as males, we don't learn about grace until another male forces their will on top of us to correct us. You know, it's like a bull elephant with a younger bull elephant. Sometimes force has to be forced upon you to tell you that you are doing wrong.
Mhm.
Grace is not always given to us by simply, you know, saying a prayer or something else, you know, that's going to say automatically grace is going to be there through a spell. Sometimes when we cast these spells to tell the goddess, hey, I just want some grace, I just want peace and quiet, sometimes we bring it on ourselves.
Mhm. You gotta be
You know,
careful though
it was,
what you ask for and how you
you
ask
know,
for it, because them spirits got a sense of humor. My biological
And
mother kept asking her spirits for a break, and they gave her one.
yeah,
She tripped in the grocery store and broke her kneecap, and was in a wheelchair for 6 months, and everything was on pause.
Well, it's just like that one
Because
time when I was wanting the charger really bad and I cast a spell for it. Well, I got the charger, but I had to sacrifice my good truck. I ended up totaling it, but I got the charger.
Yep.
You know, was
Well,
I
it's
ethically right? Only mentally for the time.
that
You
goes
know, the
back to
truck
the
is
when
far
you're
more useful.
doing spell work, are you willing to accept the consequences of your desires? Because
Yeah,
every act of magic
yeah.
has a sacrifice. It's the questions of, are you willing to pay it? Are you emotionally capable of handling what
Yeah,
happens?
exactly.
And is it
Yes.
worth it? And like, these are things to consider
Yeah.
before you're doing spell work. There's a whole list. I have in my Book of Shadows, I have a whole list of prompts of like, if you're deciding to do spell work, I need to go through this checklist. And then I need to make sure that everything is right before I decide to move forward. Because if I'm not willing to accept the consequences, the price, or, you know, I'm not happy with something, I'm not doing the work. Because it's
Hey, Mike.
not worth the output.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mike. Would you say that ethics is intertwined with the aspects of a meaningful life and a spiritual life? Would you think that ethics brings a balance to both?
Yes.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The way I would view that is our ethics, our right and wrong, help us to determine how we can maintain balance. And if we need to really like to understand this more, look at what you're engaging in. Are you engaging in something that makes you feel good or makes you feel like crap? If you're
Yeah.
engaging, then that tells you right there. Are you engaging ethically? A lot of perfect example, working with work. I see so many people say little white lies to get out of work.
Mhm.
Well, all that really
Yeah.
is doing is culminating all of that pent up energy inside of you, and then that experience will manifest in your life somewhere, somehow.
Mhm. And if you're
Yeah.
doing that to avoid the
Yeah. Usually it
lessons
does.
that
No job.
spirits are putting out for you, then there are consequences. If you keep, my mentor put the phrase that if you ignore the calling from the universe, she knocks quietly, then she knocks loudly, then she screams, and then she comes with a frying pan. Choose which way she comes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautifully stated.
So, in my mind, good ethics and spiritual ethics promote a healthy lifestyle and a collective well-being. Would everybody here agree with that?
Yeah,
As far as
100%.
because if we're going for spiritual cultivation and to like be our best self or like pull in our higher self, then you need to act like it. And
yeah,
like,
I believe that having a good centering and grounding cultivates compassion, wisdom,
yeah,
nonviolence. And I'm not saying, just because you're nonviolent doesn't mean that you have to be a patsy and be a pacifist to the truth. Every once in a while you do have to raise up your wolf fangs and bite back to defend yourself or loved ones. But I also believe that it aims to reduce suffering, and it does promote well-being. And we should each individual look at, how do we live our life? What is our ethics? Do we take more delight in putting down our brother and our sister instead of lifting them up and telling them that when you see that they're doing their best? I believe in that. I believe in, you know, don't give don't give charity, give a handout and just help them up. A hand up is far much better than charity.
No, yes.
because then you help them mentally and spiritually going, hey, that thank you. Now it also promotes a chain reaction where they're going to give a handout, which is far much better than handing out charity, and it's a domino effect. And those are part of my ethical cores of how does my spirituality, my ethics intertwine? You know, meaningful life. How does this translate to the future, to my children, to my grandchildren? It's like I said, when people see us doing good things and we're holding our head up, not as snobs, but as spiritual beings who's walking through our life, and we're not going, I'm holier than now. It is, I am walking a holy path, and I'm compassionate, and I love everybody around me, and I want people to see that. But that, like I said, that doesn't mean, hold power over people, because, like for me, I'm a third initiate. Do I hold power over people? I could, but I don't, because I want my students, my family, to see that love and light can come not from holding power, but by showing that power through love and compassion.
Mhm.
I truly
Well, it's a
believe that.
choice, and I agree with that. Where
Yeah.
I view
My friends,
myself
I
as
do
the
have to
student.
go. Thank you very much, Thunder and Nico. It was a pleasure. Everyone viewing, thank you for tuning in, and I hope everyone has a beautiful day.
You as well.
I'll
Yeah.
see you guys all later. Bye.
You as well.
Have a good night.
Mike, thank you for joining us. Blessed be, brother. You take care. And we're going to have to do more classes like this.
Absolutely.
It's very important that we get out there. you know.
It's
Well,
completely.
anyway, we should draw this to an end anyway. But I just want to say to everybody, love and light, may compassion and love bring you the ways of the goddess. And thank you so much for everything that everybody has done.
Yep.
Thank you, Nico. Blessed
Thank you.
be.
Blessings.